Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of Movies with My Cat. My name is Nathan, and just off camera, that's my pal over there, Big Head, who's not wearing his Halloween costume like we planned. What happened to the costume? How does it not fit? It's mostly spandex. So I gotta just wear this the rest of the show by myself? I guess it does look kind of cool. All right, we're leaving it on. So today's episode is going to be about Halloween specials. Now, I grew up in a household that did not allow Halloween celebration. So as a kid, I kind of missed out on everything except for the two biggest Halloween specials, of course, being It's Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown, and one of my favorites to this day still, honestly, the Garfield Halloween special. Fantastic music.
Or I could put on some black pajamas and go as a big fat Halloween cat.
You know, even with my upbringing where Halloween was, we weren't allowed to celebrate it, those were so big that they couldn't keep it from me. It was on network television, I watched those. But I missed out on so many other cool ones, So today, what we're going to do is we're going to look at 4 Halloween specials from the 70's, 80's, and 90's that I missed out on. Maybe you missed out on. And we can check them out together, and we'll see what we would have thought of them as kids, and, maybe what we think of them now. So, all right, well, here we go. Here's the first special. This thing is really hot and uncomfortable. Okay, so the first Halloween special we're going to look at is one called The Halloween That Almost Wasn't. Now, The Halloween That Almost Wasn't first aired on ABC on October 28, 1979, but it was in regular Halloween season rotation on the Disney Channel from the early 80s well into the 90s. So, if you were a kid into this kind of stuff, there's a good chance you saw this back in the day. Now, the version that I watched was on a YouTube channel. It was from an airing on Chicago's WLS. And the particular video I watched was on a very, very fun YouTube channel called the Museum of Classic Chicago Television, which has hours and hours of amazing content, so go check them out. Right off the bat, though, let me say that as far as I can tell, The Halloween That Almost Wasn't is not related in any way to, 1, the 1966 movie The Christmas That Almost Wasn't, or 2, the 1972 Hanna-Barbera special The Thanksgiving That Almost Wasn't, or 3, NBC's 1982 half-hour special The Valentine's Day That Almost Wasn't. The Halloween That Almost Wasn't was directed by Primetime Emmy winner Bruce Bilson, who has lots of experience directing TV shows, doing so for classics like Get Smart and Hogan's Heroes, Love American Style, and later on the cult favorite Dinosaurs. He also directed several made-for-TV movies, including one called The Dallas Cowboy Cheerleaders that came out the same year as The Halloween That Almost Wasn't. Probably never. You're going to have to watch that one on your own, buddy. I figured as much. Well, The Halloween That Almost Didn't Happen stars Judd Hirsch, who's probably best known for his starring role on Taxi, which was still a new show at the time when he filmed this. Now, Hirsch plays Count Dracula, and the Count is home one night with Igor, even though I thought Igor was a Dr. Frankenstein's assistant. I don't know. Well, here we see he's staying at Dracula's castle for some reason. Maybe they're splitting the rent. Igor is played by Henry Gibson, who did lots of stuff, but you might recognize him, as we did, as the doctor from The Burbs. Now, watching TV here, Dracula and Igor, they see a shocking news report that Halloween is in danger of not happening. And that news report claims it's Dracula himself who might be responsible for ending Halloween forever. Now, Dracula knows for a fact he made no such declaration. So, in an attempt to clear things up, Dracula has a meeting at his place with all of the principal monsters. And they're all here. We have the Mummy, who's played by real-life magician Robert Fitch. And then there's Zabar the Zombie, played by Josip Illik, who previous to this was actually in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Then you got Warren the Werewolf, who's played by Jack Riley, and Jack Riley would later go on to voice Stu Pickles in the Rugrats. Then there's Frankenstein's monster, played by John Schuck, who would later go on to play Herman Munster in The Munsters Today, which I guess was a show from 89 to 91. I've never heard of it, never seen it. Yeah, he is. Although, Big Head, I think you actually mean he's Frankenstein's monster-shaped. But, you know, common mistake. All right, I deserve that. He is built for that, though. He's tall and he's got wide shoulders. Great shape to his face. And last but not least, there's the Witch, played by the Emmy Award-winning Mariette Hartley, whose previous dealings with vampires include being in the excellent 1971 film The Return of Count Yorga. And once all the monsters are assembled at Dracula's place, he addresses a concern he has, which is, as monsters, you just aren't scary anymore. First, he calls out Warren the Werewolf for shaving all of his wolf hair off just so he could be in a razor commercial. And then next, Frankenstein's monster gets laid into for being more into tap dancing than scaring people.
And you, letting that movie influence you so much that now, instead of terrifying the countryside, what are you doing? You're tap dancing.
I like tap dancing.
So you like tap dancing. I'll give you tap dancing.
It's soon revealed that it's the witch who started the rumor that Halloween was in danger. And she started the rumor because she's got a long list of grievances. And if they aren't addressed, she's going to quit.
Why? Because I can't stand being a witch anymore. I'm tired of all those ugly girl jokes. Tired of being feared instead of loved. Tired of getting less respect than you. And tired of taking orders from you. Why should you be the leader of the monster world and not me? Because I am your superior.
Yeah, well, I mean, I know you're penchant for the goth lifestyle, buddy, but you're also right. I mean, she's lovely. She's quite lovely. But more importantly, she has a legitimate point. Why should the witch play second banana to Dracula as the official ambassador of Halloween, especially when we learn that Halloween cannot start officially without her ride over the moon? That seems pretty important to me. The witch also wants Dracula to be more appreciative towards his horde of monsters. Just because they're spooky monsters doesn't mean they aren't entitled to have a little fun every once in a while. And in 1979, a little fun every once in a while translates to what else?
And you'll take me disco dancing every night?
Disco dancing? I don't remember disco dancing.
It's 3 minutes to 12.
Oh, now I remember.
Disco dancing, of course. Now, eventually, two hopeful trick-or-treaters stop by to plead with the witch to reconsider. One kid also explains to her that she always dresses as the witch because the witch is her favorite. Now, that seals it for the witch. You know, it really moves her, so she's back in. And true to his word, Count Dracula holds up his end of the bargain and submits to a good old-fashioned disco party, which we see over the closing credits. And it does look pretty fun.
Keep on thinking, don't stop thinking, love will soon come again. Keep on thinking.
By the way, the song that you hear in the end credits there, it's called Keep On Thinking, and it's by a musical artist named Zenobia, a.k.a. Zenobia Concrete, who played a part in a genuine disco classic, actually, having performed background vocals on the chorus to the song It's Raining Men by the Weather Girls. So that's a fun disco fact that you can share with your one auntie who still wears animal print leopard tops, you know? She'd appreciate it. Yep, basically. Eventually, Dracula gives in to the demands. And yeah, I guess I kind of ruined the ending for anyone that hasn't seen the Halloween that almost didn't happen. I don't normally like to give the ending away, you know, whenever we cover a feature here. But heads up, I'm likely going to spoil the ending to all of these features. But that's okay because you'll probably have figured out the ending to every single one of these family-friendly features within the first 4 minutes or so anyhow. Oh yeah. I guess if you're watching this video and you're 6, first of all, what a cool first grader, you know? But yeah, I guess I ruined it for you. My apologies. I owe you a juice box. Of course, the Halloween that almost didn't happen is so much fun. It won't really matter if you know how it ends. It's also genuinely funny for both super cool first graders and old guy dropouts like myself. If you're not saying teeny tiny bat over and over again at the end of the night, then you watched it wrong.
Here goes.
Teeny tiny bat, 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 teeny tiny bat.
The entire cast understood the assignment, leaning into their roles with gusto and seemingly having a great time, honestly. It looks like they're having a lot of fun with it. And to boot, the backdrop to all of the fun is actually a pretty spooky looking setting. If you're thinking, hey, they did a great job dressing up that set to look like an actual castle. Well, that's because much of what you see on screen is the interior of an actual castle. It's an estate known as Lyndhurst, and it sits in Tarrytown, New York, near the banks of the Hudson River. I guess technically it's a giant mansion. I mean, look at this place. It's a castle. The Halloween That Almost Wasn't was later released to VHS with the alternate title, The Night Dracula Saved the World, which is admittedly a better title, if not a little less accurate. Like I mentioned earlier, I watched it on YouTube, specifically on the channel the Museum of Chicago Television, or rather the Museum of Classic Chicago Television. And I'd encourage you to do the same because that particular channel almost always includes the original commercials that aired during the show. In this case, The Halloween That Almost Wasn't was presented by the toy company Kenner. So there were all kinds of amazing commercials like this one for this gnarly looking Kenner Stretch X-Ray monstrosity.
Give up, Stretch X-Ray. We see through your evil schemes.
Look at that thing.
Stretch X-Ray, new from Kenner.
That's awesome. And so is this toothy guy, made by Play-Doh. Now, his name is Dr. Drillin' Because it's not a skin flick. That's not what it is. So the lesson that Dracula learned in The Halloween That Almost Wasn't about remembering to have fun and letting the other monsters have some fun was clearly a lesson that stuck. And we know this because not long after, in 1980, the Canadian Halloween special, Boo, comes along as an hour-long sketch comedy show starring Dracula and his crew of monsters dancing and singing. Boo is a Halloween special that originally aired on CBC, which is the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, during the 1980 Halloween season. But the version I saw was from 1982, airing on WGN, and again it came from the Museum of Classic Chicago Television. In fact, it was the only place I could find Boo, so props to the Museum of Classic Chicago Television. Now, the opening scene shows us a horse-drawn carriage delivering a coffin to a spooky castle. When the lid is removed, Count Dracula pops out and announces that this broadcast is from Television Center in Transylvania.
Dead from Television Center in Transylvania, it's Boo!
But again, because it's a CBC production, it's probably just a set somewhere in Toronto. Then the monsters break into a song and dance number, and that's definitely going to get stuck in your head.
We'll catch a Boo! Boo! We're gonna scare ya, we won't spare ya, and if we scare ya, we will scare ya, Boo!
So that is the theme song to Boo, and it's admittedly pretty good. It's an earworm. Yeah, that's a good question, Big Head. You know, I don't remember seeing a single ghost in this entire hour-long special. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think there's any ghosts. And maybe I'm being a bit pedantic, but I feel like Boo is a distinctly ghost or phantom type noise, but there's no ghost here. Either way. So this is the point where we typically throw in a few facts here and there while breaking down the plot for you. The problem is there's not a whole lot of info about Boo. It's mostly just a few people remembering it fondly, you know? So the facts are scarce. And since Boo is a variety show with mostly rapid-fire bits and skits, there's not really a plot to be broken down. It's a lot of stuff like this.
Hello, doctor. This is the Count. I'm very sick. Can you come over right away?
Oh, I'm sorry, but I don't make coffin calls.
Now that Count Dracula is played by an actor I'm unfamiliar with named Ben Gordon, and he's pretty good as a jovial vampire, you know, and one of the hosts for the evening's festivities. He shares hosting duties with the lovely Countessa, and the Countessa is played by Barbara Law, who started off as a singer, even scoring a minor disco hit in 1979 called Take All of Me. Disco's playing a bigger part in this than I thought it was going to. Now, Dr. Frankenstein, who was played by Jack Duffy, was another singer turned actor. Not a disco singer, though, this time. He actually started his career with the Tommy Dorsey Orchestra. As for Dr. Frankenstein's monster, buddy, that's what he is. That's what he's called. What do you want me to say? You know what? Actually, in this one, they do refer to him as Frankie. So we're just going to go with that. And this Frankie is played by Ted Ziegler. He's got a pretty wild look. You know, I think they did take a few liberties here. They for sure did with his hair, which is frightening in its own way. Before this, Ted Ziegler was well known for playing a character called Johnny Jellybean in a kids show called The Jellybean Comedy Clubhouse. He'd later go on to do lots of voiceover work for shows like The GoBots and Heathcliff. Yeah, I know, buddy, you're a Heathcliff guy. You know, we don't want to get him started on his Garfield versus Heathcliff tangent. I know, Big Head, Garfield is cool, but Heathcliff is from the streets. I've heard your Garfield is the Beatles and Heathcliff is the Rolling Stones analogy 100 times, buddy. Okay, so, and then there's Wolfie, who's a wolfman. Wolfie is played by the voice actor Peter Cullen, who's done some iconic voice work of his own, like providing the Predator with those weird clicking vocalizations, and being one of the earliest vocal incarnations of Mario from the Mario Brothers. But he's probably best known for voicing the Autobots leader, Optimus Prime. These are your main characters, and they all engage in brief, simple comedy bits. Whether or not you think they're funny bits is going to rely heavily on several things. Mainly, do you like puns? And how do you feel about dad jokes? Are you in your late 50s? Because the jokes we hear on Boo, they're very much of their time. For example, they make a crack about Chuck Barris. No, I mean Chuck Barris. If you don't know who Chuck Barris is, that's okay, neither did I. Chuck Barris was the host of The Gong Show and the creator of several other popular game shows back in the day. So, the kids might not get that one. They probably won't get the Howard Cosell joke either.
You must stop creating these fiendish, gruesome creatures! Give me a break! I keep telling you, I didn't create Howard Cosell!
Some jokes I didn't quite get, and I'm old, so... Well, the audience must have thought they were funny skits because, they're laughing. And like kind of a lot, too. Of course, it sounds like canned laughter, like pre-recorded laughter. The thing is, they do show a live studio audience, which seems devious, but we are dealing with monsters here, so... As with most variety shows, Boo has a couple of guest stars drop by. First, Dionne Warwick stops by, and she ends up at the castle because, like everyone that's ever wandered into a spooky castle, her car broke down in front of it. Now Dracula sees her in and shows her around, and then Miss Warwick decides this is the best time for her to sing her 1979 song, Deja Vu. Yeah, yes it is. It's pretty smooth. We also see her later on looking into a crystal ball with Frankie, who eventually and understandably falls in love with Dionne Warwick. Frankie decides he wants a makeover to better catch her eye, and this prompts Dionne Warwick to sing Billy Joel's 1978 hit, I Love You Just the Way You Are, and it's a pleasant enough rendition. Then our second and final guest star shows up, and it's comedian Rip Taylor, who enters the scene throwing his signature confetti around. Now, he walks into a place called The Spookeasy, and then he does an act for the audience of monsters, robots, and aliens. And his set is basically, it's a box full of comedy props, like a holy mackerel, and then a handy cap. The Spookeasy scene there, it's been compared to the bar scene or the cantina scene in Star Wars, which is understandable, especially because the band on stage definitely bears a resemblance to the Star Wars band. And the tables, they're also occupied by various creatures. We do get to eavesdrop on a few of these tables, including one with a couple of robots hitting on each other.
You are very attractive.
My name is Billy. What's yours?
Harry.
See, because it's two robots with dude names. Again, the humor is of the time, which is to say it didn't always age well. But Boo is not without its charms. It's just maybe not always for the kiddos.
Oh my God, is she in town again?
I don't even know if they'd understand it. You know, maybe Boo is played best after the kids have gone to bed and you're eating all the weird candies, you know, that you know your kid won't miss. The Nico wafers and the Almond Joy. I do like the wax lips. Okay, well, our next special only aired once on NBC. It happened in 1989 on the night just before Halloween. Just that once, which is truly a shame because it's really good.
The Halloween time of his life. The Wickedest Witch, after Alf, Monday.
It's especially good if you're a fan of the Golden Girls. Blanche Devereaux of the Golden Girls crew, aka Rue McClanahan, stars in The Wickedest Witch. And it's McClanahan who plays that Wickedest Witch. Her name is Avarissa, and she looks super awesome. Oh yeah, of Susie and the Banshees? Yeah, I can see it, kinda. Although I'd imagine that Susie Sue is probably much nicer than Avarissa. It's explained by our narrator, who's the late great Burgess Meredith, that Avarissa is so wicked that she's been banished for the last 300 years to an underground lair somewhere beneath Ohio.
Her name was Avarissa, and she was banished to an underground kingdom somewhere beneath Ohio and condemned to rule over a race of creatures called Greevils.
And as you just heard Burgess Meredith say, Avarissa wasn't alone down there. She'd been coexisting with a race of reptilian puppets called the Greevils. I say coexisting, but she actually rules over them with an iron fist. I mean, she's downright cruel at times. And despite these Greevils being some kind of winged demon, they're awfully cute. Because they are so cute, it's genuinely tough at times to see these poor critters being treated so badly.
But I've never won anything before. Can I have a prize?
Prize? We don't play for prizes. You know the rules.
Maybe just a small memento. Something people can see and take me for a winner.
I'll do even better. There. Now people can take you for granted.
Despite her cruelty towards them, Avarissa's right-hand man is a Greevil, and his name is Ersatz, and I love Ersatz, and he's a scene stealer. That's all there is to it. You know, I also found his voice to be suspiciously familiar, and then I found out why. Now, I had no idea before watching The Wickedest Witch that Blanche Devereaux wouldn't be the only 80s icon that we'd get here. Now, I don't want to say just yet who the voice of Ersatz is. I want to see if you can tell who does his voice on your own here when you hear it for yourself in just a second. Now, one day we see Avarissa looking over the fine print in her banishment contract. And it turns out there's a bit of a loophole in there that states this Halloween night is the one chance she has to free herself from her underground prison. Pay attention to Ersatz's voice.
And 300 years hence, on Halloween night, the curse may be lifted if conditions are right.
Really? Is it hence already? Well, where does the time go?
Yeah, that's right. It's Alf. Or it's, you know, the actor and puppeteer behind Alf. That's a gentleman named Paul Fusco. I loved Alf as a kid, you know. Did you watch Alf, Big Head? Jesus, take it easy, buddy. You don't like Alf? I mean, well, why don't you like Alf?
Where do you keep your casserole dishes?
Why?
The cat won't fit in the toaster.
Oh, yeah. Right. So Avarissa now knows it's possible to be set free, but she doesn't quite have all of the details as to what exactly she needs to do to make it happen. For help with that, she has to consult someone known as the all-knowing Shtick, who seems to be an oracle of some sort that lives inside of a soda machine. The all-knowing Shtick, who's played by Vegas nightclub comic Jackie Gell, explains that in order to be set free, Avarissa has to find a good kid and convince him to do a despicable deed. But she only has until the stroke of midnight to get it done, or else she'll be banished for another 300 years to confinement. It becomes clear to Avarissa that in order to pull this plan off, she's going to need some help to go topside and find a kid to bring back to the underground lair, because remember, she's trapped under Ohio. So, she'll have to send a Grievel, even though she thinks all Grievels are too dumb to do anything right. Now, we should mention the Grievels spend most of their days playing various games like bingo and trivia-based game shows, so naturally, Avarissa hosts a trivia game show that she calls I Bet Your Life, to see which Grievel might have what it takes to carry out the plan.
What famous landmark stands in the New York Harbor? It's known as the Statue of...
Limitations! The Statue of Limitations!
Wrong. And speaking of statues...
Sammy is the Grievel that passes Avarissa's game show test. Sammy is voiced by noted ventriloquist and puppeteer Ron Lucas. Now, despite Sammy being tasked with essentially kidnapping, an innocent child, and he's actually a pretty sweet Grievel. He's actually terrified to go topside, so Sammy is given a rock that can grant one wish just in case he needs to get out of a jam. Then in a flash of light, he magically beams into the bedroom of a kid named Louis, who's played by Rafi de Blasio. Louis is a young magician in training who lives in Boston. Yeah, well, under Ohio. But yeah, I don't know why they didn't just go to some place in Ohio, but they didn't, They went to Boston and they found Louis. And he does seem like a good kid, just trying to make it through the world. Louis and Sammy become fast friends, bonding over the course of a lighthearted montage. Eventually, Sammy and Louis are magically transported back to Avarissa's underground lair. Once there, Avarissa attempts to corrupt Louis by making him do something rotten to the Grievels, stuff like throwing them across the room or bonking them on the head. She even tries to get Louis to become a used car salesman. Some real nefarious stuff there, But Louis, he refuses it all, unwilling to harm any of the Grievels. Eventually, Avarissa plays into Louis's desire to be a talented magician, first giving him the power to play any instrument with just the wave of his hands.
Wow!
And then she gives him the ability to do a card trick he could never get right. And now, with only a minute left before the stroke of midnight, Avarissa tempts Louis with the most powerful of all the magic abilities. And that's the power of the scepter. All Louis has to do is point the scepter at his new friend Sammy and turn him into a stone statue. Avarissa frantically urges Louis to do it, but when Sammy tells him once he's turned to stone he can't be turned back, Louis drops the scepter to the ground where it breaks into pieces. Time runs out and Avarissa's fate is sealed for another 300 years. But unfortunately, so is Louis's, because it turns out there is no way to send him back to Boston. He'll have to spend the rest of his life trapped beneath Ohio with Avarissa and the Grievels. Now, Sammy feels really bad about having brought Louis down there in the first place. But when he says he wishes he could send Louis home, Louis vanishes. Yeah, that's right. The wishing rock. Sammy was still in possession of that rock that granted him one wish. And his wish was granted, sending Louis back to Boston, where I assume he grew up to be Chris Angel. The Wickedest Witch is a winner. I love everything about it. Rue McClanahan is great. The Grievels are amazing. And the set design looks awesome, The story is also simple enough for a kid to understand, and it's genuinely funny. Looking at the people behind it, it's not surprising. First, you have Paul Fusco, who, in addition to bringing ersatz to life, he was also a writer and producer for The Wickedest Witch. The other writers are Roger Schulman, who's best known for co-writing Shrek, and David Stephen Cohen, who was head writer of Courage the Cowardly Dog. So, comes from some pretty good stock there. The director of The Wickedest Witch was a guy named Steve Dubin, and as a director, he mostly just did episodic TV, but he actually started out as a cameraman working on some 80's classics like Eating Raoul, Godzilla 85, Teen Wolf, Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. These days, he seems to be making a name for himself as a visual effects producer on things like the Chipmunk movie, actually a bunch of different Chipmunk movies, Percy Jackson, Lord of the Rings, and most recently on the show The New Mutants. Now, speaking of visual effects, our next and final Halloween special wasn't afraid to dip its toe into emerging technology. This special comes to us from the Hanna-Barbera Animation Studio, home of Scooby-Doo, the Flintstones, Yogi Bear, the Jetsons, the Herculoids, Super Friends. This guy. Just a whole bunch of legendary cartoons. But what makes our next Halloween special is that it nixed the whole traditional animation Hanna-Barbera was known for in favor of an early use of modern CGI. We're talking about 1991's The Last Halloween. The Last Halloween was directed by Savage Steve Holland, an animator by trade who went on to direct a couple of 80s comedy favorites, Better Off Dead and One Crazy Summer. But what made me think I was really going to like The Last Halloween was the simple fact that Savage Steve Holland was also responsible for the animated whammy segments on the classic game show Press Your Luck. Anyone attached to these things was clearly a genius.
Stop.
And so we'll go from that UFO to the UFO that we see in the intro to The Last Halloween. Like our last special, this one also has a narrator, and it's William Hanna himself of Hanna-Barbera. Now he tells us that the UFO we see has 4 Martians inside of it, and they're in search of an element that Mars has run out of. It's something called Kubi. The Martians' Kubi meter locks on to Earth, where it just so happens to be Halloween night. Now, down on Earth, specifically in a town called Crystal Falls, we meet young Michael, played by Will Estes, who you might recognize if you're a fan of the TV show Blue Bloods. He was still going by Will Nipper back then, though. So Michael is exiting the school bus with his kid sister, Jeannie, played by Sarah Martinek. Now, here we learn that Jeannie has been wearing the same Halloween costume since their mom passed away. And since her mom made it, she sees it as some sort of a tribute to her mom.
Mom made it for me.
I know. But if she was still alive, don't you think she'd want you to wear something else? Anything else?
I'm never gonna wear another costume. This one has Mom in it.
They decide to go visit their dad, who runs the Cosmic Candy Factory. And when we meet Dad, we learn that the Cosmic Candy Factory is struggling to stay open because the lake that was powering the candy factory's equipment via a water mill has recently and mysteriously dried up. So now the Cosmic Candy Factory is forced to use expensive electronic equipment. It's so expensive that the candy company can't afford to stay open for the rest of the year, making this Halloween the last in Crystal Falls. Well, because, the factory was closing and there wouldn't be any cosmic candy. Well, yeah, but this is 1991. There wasn't an Amazon to get candy from. Yeah, I mean, they didn't have H-E-B in Crystal Falls, but I see what you're getting at. Just pick up some non-cosmic candy at the grocery store. But Big Head, that wouldn't help everyone that works at the candy factory, who'd be out of a job, or the town's economy. Not to mention, when it closes, Michael and Jeannie and their dad would likely have to pick up and move away from their home. So there's way more at stake here than just the lack of candy. This, of course, has the family worried, but that's when Grandpa, played by Eugene Roche, shows up to remind the kids that, hey, it's Halloween, you should be having fun. He reminds them how much their mom loved Halloween, which reminds Michael what his mom used to say about making wishes.
Mom used to tell us if you throw a stone in the lake, your wish would come true if you skip 3 times.
Your mom was the greatest wisher I ever saw.
The stone skipping thing will come back. So the kids are off to make this Halloween the best one ever. Meanwhile, we see the Martians' landing didn't go well and their ship needs some repairs. But this is our first glimpse at the Martians in all of their CGI'd glory. So who are these Martians? Well, first let's meet Scooter. I believe those balls above his head are the aforementioned Kubi meter. Big Head, come on, dude. A testicle joke? Not where your balls are. By the way, you were neutered years ago, so your balls are probably in a landfill somewhere. They are. Now, Scooter, he has a very deep and gravelly voice. It's very similar to Dr. Claw from Inspector Gadget, if you remember that. But that makes sense that Dr. Claw and Scooter have similar voices because the same guy does both of their voices, and that guy is Frank Welker, and he's one of the most prolific voice actors of all time, with over 860 credits to his name, including Fred from Scooby-Doo and a bunch of Decepticons from the original Transformers series. Then there's Bing, who almost seems to be like a pet or maybe a trusty mascot of some sort. Frank Welker also does Bing's voice, but all Bing says is Bing, Bing, Bing. And the little guy in the space helmet there, that's Rom2 the Great, the leader of this group. And he's voiced by legendary voice actor Don Messick, who also voiced Scooby-Doo, Boo Boo Bear, Papa Smurf, and Hamilton J. Pig, just to name a few. And last but not least, there's Gleep, who's the technical engineer of the group. He's got big old ears, almost like a chihuahua, you know. Maybe that's why Gleep makes fast friends with Michael and Jeannie's dog, who happens to be near the Martian ship when it lands. Now, Gleep is voiced by Grammy and Oscar winner Paul Williams, who's done a fair amount of voice work, but he's mainly known as a songwriter, having penned hits for The Carpenters, Barbra Streisand, Three Dog Night. Yeah, that's true. You know, he co-wrote Rainbow Connection. So that's our Martian crew, and they set out to find some much-needed Kubi, you know, except for Gleep, who's left behind to repair the ship. Now, as the aliens wander the streets of Crystal Falls in search of Kubi, they cross paths with Michael and Jeannie, who have bags full of Halloween candy, which causes the Martians' Kubi meter to go off, because if you haven't figured it out yet, Kubi is just what us Earthlings call candy. So they chase the kids into the woods, which initially scares the kids, but they come around pretty quickly when Rom2 officially and elegantly introduces himself to Jeannie, who he mistakes for a queen on account of her Wonder Woman costume. She explains that her mom made it for her, but the aliens don't know what a mom is, so Jeannie explains it to them and what makes a mom so special. Now, this causes Bing to get excited with the idea of having a mom of their own, but Rom2 reminds the team of their mission, which of course is Kubi. And it's a genuinely sweet moment. You know, I just wish Rom2 would have used a different way to say it.
They take care of you and love you. And they have secret ways of making everything extra fun. And they're more beautiful than fairies.
Negative, Bing. You cannot go probing for a mother of your own. We have come to locate Kubi.
Yeah, the word probing in relation to a visiting alien race has certain connotations. Yeah, please don't. Now that the kids understand the Martians' dilemma, they decide to help the aliens on their mission to acquire as much Kubi as possible by showing them how to trick-or-treat. And they're having a great time. You know, they're getting lots of candies. Things are going pretty well. That is, of course, until Bing runs ahead of the group and goes straight for a big spooky mansion near a graveyard. And that's a problem because that spooky mansion belongs to Miss Gisborne, who's an evil scientist played by Rhea Perlman, and her hulking assistant, Hans, who's played by Richard Mole. I love both of these actors, so I'm biased, of course, but I think they play their parts perfectly. You know, they really lean into their roles here, and it's awesome. Miss Gisborne is working on a Fountain of Youth serum, and she's discovered the secret ingredient is bugs. Now, this puts Bing in even more danger because, well, I mean, look at the guy. Yeah, Bing is essentially the biggest grub bug you've ever seen. And the kids, they do mount a rescue mission to the spooky mansion there, and they save Bing, and that's great, but now that leads to the reveal that Gisborne's research is what actually led Lake Crystal to dry out. And even though the kids are saved by their dad and Bing is safely reunited with the rest of the Martian crew, it doesn't change the fact that the lake is gone, and the Cosmic Candy Factory will still have to close. Or will it? Well, luckily, this is a kids' Halloween special, and there is a happy ending.
Take this. It might make a good skipping stone, Michael.
Oh yeah, that's weird. The Wickedest Witch also had a happy ending with a magic rock in it. How about that? Well, despite winning a Primetime Emmy Award in 1992 for Outstanding Special Visual Effects, it didn't quite catch on as a network Halloween tradition, only being re-aired a small handful of times after its initial broadcast. That's unfortunate because we think it's well worth making it a Halloween tradition for you and the kids. But what really surprises me about the failure of The Last Halloween is learning that this wasn't just supposed to be a one-off Halloween special, you know? It was actually the culmination of a whole ad campaign that the Mars Candy Company dumped a bunch of money into. As it turns out, Romtu and the gang were being propped up as the new representatives for the many products of the candy brand. And before The Last Halloween was ever aired, you could actually find the Martian Gang in both print ads and in commercials. I watched 2 separate commercials, one that came out after the special where the Martians seemed to have the same voices, as the ones in the special, and then one from 1990 that had some slightly different voices.
It's my last one. Whoa! That's cool.
Greetings, Earthlings!
Who are you guys?
We're the mission from Mars. We've come to save our Halloween.
We've lost all the candy on our planet.
We want the best candy on Earth.
Cool.
Can you dudes help us?
If I'm 8 years old, the first time I see The Last Halloween, it's my favorite Halloween special. Unfortunately, I wasn't 8 when it came out. I was 13, so I paid more attention to dressing like The Cure and my emerging hormones. Sadly, The Last Halloween wasn't anywhere on my radar. I mean, none of these specials were, because again, I wasn't really allowed to celebrate Halloween. So I'm really grateful now that I love Halloween that these people made these videos available, and there's going to be a link to all of them in the description. I'm also grateful to have shared these with you, and if you haven't already seen them, check them out. Better yet, if you can, see them with a friend. Big Head, what do you got? That's right, support your local cat. And that's going to do it for us today. You guys have a happy and safe Halloween. And we'll see you on the next episode of Movies with My Cat.
Where can you find the English Channel? Yes, hideous creature number 2.
On cable?
Wrong. Not only wrong, stupid. You must be eliminated.